The dog kept getting between the baby and the bookcase. They thought he had finally snapped. He had never been more correct in his life. Imara Nkosi had waited 3 years for the Bernese Mountain Dog she had always wanted. She had researched breeders for 18 months, read every behavioral study she could find, taken a canine first aid course. By the time Coda arrived, a fluffy tricolor 8-week-old, she had prepared more thoroughly than she had prepared for almost anything else in her adult life. This was not a dog she was going to misread. Then her daughter Zara was born, and something happened to Coda that Imara could not explain with anything she had read. Zara was 10 months old when she became mobile in the serious way. The way that means furniture is a launching pad, and nothing on a low shelf is safe. And Coda, who had been unremarkably good for 10 months, began doing something that first looked protective and then, day by day, started to look like something else. The bookcase in the living room was original to the house. An old colonial built in 1938, the bookcase built into the wall, painted many times over the decades, the kind of furniture that holds family history in layers. Zara had discovered it. She pulled herself up along it. She reached toward the lower shelves where paperbacks and old board games lived. Every time she reached toward the lower portion of the bookcase, Coda was there, between Zara and the wood, his body blocking. Not aggressive, no sound, no stiffening, just present, redirecting a 95-pound wall of tricolor fur that appeared with a consistency that could not be coincidence. Imara noticed it after 4 days. On the 5th day, she watched it happen 3 times. On the 6th day, she called her husband, Raymond, and showed him the footage she had taken on her phone. Raymond was a high school science teacher. He watched the footage twice and said, "He's resource guarding the bookcase. He's claiming it." She shook her head. He doesn't do that with anything else. But Raymond had already reached for his phone to look up trainers who specialized in resource guarding in large breeds. They booked a behavioral consultation for the following Thursday. In the meantime, they put up a baby gate across the living room to keep Zara away from the bookcase. Coda sat at the gate and pressed his nose through the bars toward the bookcase 3 times a day. Steady, purposeful, not interested in the gate, interested in what was on the other side of it. Imara called a friend from her old neighborhood, a woman named Sylvia who had grown up in an old house and knew things about old houses that Imara did not know. She told Sylvia about the dog and the bookcase, and Sylvia went quiet for a moment and then said, "What year was the house built?" The lead inspector came 2 days later. She tested the lower portion of the built-in bookcase, the sections within a crawling baby's reach, the sections where paint had been chipping at the joints, invisible chips, the kind that fell as dust, the kind that settled on the floor where a 10-month-old spent most of her day. The paint tested positive for lead. The lower sections of the bookcase had a paint layer dating to the late 1940s under subsequent repaints that had cracked and allowed the older layer to flake. The dust on the floor near the bookcase, the floor where Zara played, tested positive. Zara's blood lead level tested at 6.2 micrograms per deciliter. The threshold for action is 3.5. She was above it, not in the range of acute poisoning, but in the range of slow neurological accumulation, the kind that does not announce itself, that builds across months, that affects development in ways that show up later, in school, in attention, in processing. Dr. Sandra Winters, pediatric toxicologist, told Imara and Raymond that earlier detection at this stage meant full recovery with monitoring and environmental remediation. She said, "Caught now, she's fine." Continued exposure would have changed that picture significantly. She looked at Imara. "What made you look at the bookcase?" Imara said, "The dog. If you stay for stories about what animals detect before we do, you're in the right place. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one." Has your dog ever focused on a specific piece of furniture or spot in your home in a way you couldn't explain? Tell us in the comments. These stories deserve to be heard. The bookcase was stripped, sealed, and the lower sections refinished to encapsulate the old paint layers. The floor near it was professionally remediated. Zara's blood lead levels returned to normal within 4 months. She is 2 years old now and uses the bookcase to practice pulling herself up to reach the picture books on the second shelf, which is where Imara moved them specifically for her. Kota no longer stations himself between Zara and the bookcase. He checked it once after the remediation, that specific long inhale at the lower joints, and then walked away and lay down in the kitchen. The consultation with the behavioral trainer was canceled. There was nothing to fix. Every guardian deserves to be recognized, even the ones who never asked for anything in return. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe so you never miss the next one.